Trump today, and I am so excited to be with you despite all the craziness that is going on in this world. The U.S. Senate is voting on the quote-unquote big, beautiful, horrible, inhumane Donald budget today, and somehow this thing got worse for the American people since Friday. Josh Hawley may have been right when he called this budget morally wrong, but he still voted to move it forward over the weekend. But at least one Senate Republican has a spine, maybe, kinda. Tom Tillis is deeply conservative, as you know, a true Tea Party conservative. He didn't speak to us from the floor of the Senate. He spoke to his fellow Republicans. And besides calling someone a socialist, I don't know that there's any other greater insult among Republicans than comparing something to Obamacare. Tillis also announced that he will not seek re-election. And we're hearing reports that, this is probably about an hour ago, that Susan Collins is moving towards voting no. However, I don't know whether to be concerned or excited. So with that, let's dive in. Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt held a press conference today and somehow managed to be even more combative than usual. Between snapping at reporters and dodging questions, she did what she always does, try to spin Donald's failures into fantasies of success. But one thing that she can't spin, no matter how hard she tries, is the disaster that is Donald's so-called big abominable bill. Republicans are openly at war with each other over this thing, with one of the biggest fault lines being the massive increase to the federal deficit. Leavitt, ever the spin machine, tried to deflect from the truth. Here's what she said about the CBO's damning estimate.
Well, can you respond to the CBO estimate that the Senate bill would increase the deficit by nearly $3.3 trillion?
This is one of the most fiscally conservative pieces of legislation that has ever made its way through Capitol Hill. There's $2 trillion in mandatory savings in this bill, and not only that, the projected growth that this bill will bring to our economy. It will be an economic boom. The Council of Economic Advisors has an analysis that shows that the bill will generate $4.1 trillion in economic growth, and it will cut taxes, putting more money back into the American people's pockets. That's why this president wants this bill to pass, and I know he's busy working the phones and doing what he needs to do today to make it happen. So we'll see you all later. Thank you. We'll see you in Florida tomorrow.
There's honestly days where this woman makes Sarah Huckabee Sanders seem like a saint, and Sarah is no saint. But look, no matter how much she pretends, even Republicans know this bill's too much. And like clockwork, Elon Musk is back on social media throwing a tantrum. He took to Twitter today to say, and we're going to pull it up here, it is obvious with the insane spending of this bill, which increases the debt ceiling by a record $5 trillion, that we live in a one-party country, the Porky Pig Party. Time for a new political party that actually cares about the people. Now, you know, it's adorable when Elon pretends he's not rooting for the same GOP clowns who wrote this bill stuffed with pork and now can't agree on how to serve it. Leavitt was also asked about Donald's growing tension with Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Her response, you may want to know? Not exactly reassuring, but no worries. She brought props. Let's take a look.
The president has not been shy about acting on things that he believes in. Why not just fire Jerome Powell and put in somebody that is going to lower rates? Why wait?
Well, it's a good question, and one you can ask the president, because that's a decision for him to make. But you're right to point out the politicization of the Fed, and it's very unfortunate for our country. But Jerome Powell cut rates numerous times ahead of the election when Joe Biden was in this Oval Office, but now he refuses to, and the economy is in a much better place. So there really isn't a good explanation for that, and the president is rightfully calling attention to it. We have interest rates that are still too high. So the president sent this note to the Fed chair today. And if you look at this chart, this is a chart of all of the interest rates of many countries throughout the world. At the top is Switzerland. They're only paying a quarter for interest rates. Cambodia, Japan, Denmark, Thailand, Botswana, Barbados, Taiwan, Bulgaria, Cuba, Sweden, Morocco, Cabo Verde, South Korea, Algeria, Canada, Albania, Libya, Malaysia, China, New Zealand, Trinidad and Tobago. Czechia, Bolivia, Australia, Costa Rica, the Bahamas, Kuwait, Papua New Guinea, Bosnia, United Kingdom, and the UAE are all paying lower interest rates than the United States of America, which has one of the hottest and strongest economies in the world.
Of course, Levitt and Donald's claim that we should have lower interest rates like Vietnam or Taiwan are based on concealing the truth. There are many, many reasons these countries have lower interest rates. For instance, the US dollar is a global reserve currency. These countries' currencies are not. The US often needs higher rates to manage global demand for dollars, control inflation, and sustain bond attractiveness. The countries listed don't face this pressure. Those countries, understandably, have less developed financial markets. And that's just the start. If Donald cared about economic stability, he wouldn't be undermining the Fed. But every time he threatens Powell's independence, the markets dip and the dollar weakens. This is a reckless game. Undermining the Fed for political gain doesn't just weaken our institutions. It puts American families, savings, and stability literally at risk. Trump doesn't want a strong dollar. He wants a strongman economy that he can control. Playing games with the Fed might score MAGA points, but it tanks markets, rattles investors, and threatens your wallet. Trump's trying to bully his way into lower rates like it's a reality show, not a global economy. And with that, I think we're going to go a little segue here. The Senate is in a full Voterama mode today, combing through Donald's bloated budget bill and voting on amendment after amendment in a desperate effort to drag it across the finish line. This chaos follows a razor-thin procedural vote late Saturday night. All but 2 Republicans voted to advance the bill after hours of delay and frantic backroom dealing. This bill is supposed to take place today. We're still waiting on the exact time. Donald's cronies made last-minute promises to wavering senators, dragging the vote out for more than 3 hours as GOP holdouts demanded guarantees. But now, as the bill moves towards a full vote, those promises are unraveling, and Republicans are turning on each other. While voting is still underway, tensions are boiling over, especially around Donald's proposed Medicaid cuts. Senator Thom Tillis gave a blistering floor speech this morning, as I mentioned at the beginning, directly calling out Donald. Let's take a look.
So what do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years? When President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid because the funding's not there anymore, guys. I think when the White House senators advising the president are not telling him that the effect of this bill is to break a promise. And you know the last time I saw a promise broken around health care, with respect to my friends on the other side of the aisle, it's when somebody said, if you like your health care, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. We found out that wasn't true. That made me the second Republican Speaker of the House since the Civil War, ladies and gentlemen, because we betrayed the promise to the American people. 2 years later, 3 years later, it actually made me a U.S. Senator, because in 2010, it had just been proposed. And just anticipation of what was going to happen was enough to have a sea change election that swept Republicans into the majority for the second time in 100 years.
Now, Tillis knows just how devastating those Medicaid cuts would be for his state and his reelection chances. For once, he's putting his political survival above loyalty to Trump. But again, as we know, he's not running again. Levitt hit back in her presser, flat out saying Tillis was wrong, which usually means he hit a nerve, especially after mentioning that Trump's advisors are steering him off a cliff. When even GOP senators in purple states start calling out Trump's Medicaid madness, you know how toxic this plan is. They're not defending healthcare. They're defending their seats. And again, in this case, vacating them. Senator Raphael Warnock also pulled no punches in laying out what this bill means for the working class, especially working class Americans on Medicaid. Let's take a look.
We're taking away health care from kids and then burdening them with the debt. We are engaged in Robin Hood in reverse, this body of stealing from the poor in order to give to the rich. This massive transfer of wealth from the bottom to the to the top. Yeah, this is socialism for the rich.
I think he sums it up perfectly. And it's not just healthcare at risk. Millions of jobs are on the line too. Senator Brian Schatz laid that out better than just about anybody. Let's take a look.
The building trades union called this bill, quote, the biggest job-killing bill in the history of this country. And they go on, simply put, it is the equivalent of terminating more than 1,000 Keystone XL pipeline projects.
They are literally just trying to make things better for the rich and worse for the working class people. It's not about cutting spending at all. It's about paying themselves and letting others suffer. Now, as Republicans try to tank our budget, they're also continuing their illegal and absurd battle against immigrants. I think we're going to cut to an interview from Mahmoud. Mahmoud Khalil, the student activist who spent months detained by ICE as Donald and his staff attempt to illegally deport pro-Palestine protesters, has given his first major interview since being released from ICE custody. In his first major interview, Khalil sat down with MSNBC on Saturday. Khalil and his wife spoke about the trauma of his detention, including the devastating moment he missed the birth of their first child.
I was supposed to give birth in Michigan, actually. That was the plan, to be around my family. Mahmoud was about to start a new job. So we decided that I'm not going to go to Michigan because I want to stay close to him. I didn't even want to be an hour plane ride away from him. I didn't want him to miss anything. So we had discussed it a lot before he was taken. After he got detained, it was kind of like a race against the clock for me, at least. We had a very limited time and I needed him to be back home. So it was a fight every single day, hoping that I'm going to hear something, hoping, they're going to let him out either on bail or whatever it is. I think I got to a point where I was like, he's most likely not going to be home. I started to accept that. It was still hard, even after I got to the hospital. I still had like a sliver of hope that, he's going to be here. They're going to let him out on furlough, which they ended up denying after an hour.
This story is the perfect example of cruelty, and specifically the cruelty that Donald and his regime embody. His detainment is callous and cruel, and it was in the first place. But the fact that they went even further in refusing to let him witness the birth of his child is absolutely disgusting. I'm a dad of two, and I can't imagine anything getting in the way of missing those moments other than literally being behind bars illegally. Despite the awful circumstances Khalil is still facing, he's not backing down. When asked by one of the MSNBC interviewers if he planned to continue the fight, he gave a resounding yes. Take a look.
I don't think there's a choice where your people are being slaughtered by the day, that you would remain silent or not. It's very uncomfortable. It's very risky. But also the moral price I would pay if I remain silent. I believe it's much higher. That's why I don't consider that now, well, like I'm out, let me go about my life. Because unfortunately my life is rooted in fighting this injustice. And I can't imagine myself just remaining silent while bombs are being thrown on the heads of my people.
Khalil's case is far from over. While a judge ordered his release from an ICE detention facility, they're still actively trying to go through the court proceedings necessary to deport him. His bravery and unwillingness to bend the knee to Donald is more important than ever. Khalil's courage in the face of Trump's cruelty is nothing short of heroic. While the system tries to grind him down, he's standing tall, reminding all of us what real patriotism and resistance literally looks like. His fight is our fight. Abrego Garcia like Khalil, is dealing with a regime willing to do anything to deport him. Excuse me. When it comes to the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, the Trump regime's tactics just keep getting shadier. New court filings show that the administration has agreed to spare a key witness from deportation, literally in exchange for his cooperation in testifying against Abrego Garcia. That witness, Jose Ramon Hernandez Reyes, a 38-year-old with a long criminal record, including convictions for smuggling migrants, illegally re-entering the U.S. after deportation, and even, quote, deadly conduct for firing a gun while drunk in a Texas community. Now, despite this record, court documents reveal that Hernandez Reyes has been released early from federal prison, moved to a halfway house, and granted at least one more year in the U.S., all because he's now the, quote, first cooperator in the government's case against Abrego. According to DHS, Hernandez Reyes owned the SUV that Garcia was allegedly driving during the 2022 traffic stop by the Tennessee Highway Patrol. The stop at the center of this entire case. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about public safety. It's about political theater. The Trump regime, the Donald regime, since we're on the Mary Trump show, is cutting deals with convicted criminals while trying to deport a working class man who's already been wrongfully deported once in violation of a federal court order. And that's not the only contradiction. Just this week, Abrego's attorneys asked a judge to keep him in custody because they can't trust the regime not to deport him again. Can you imagine that? ICE has refused to commit to holding back, even though a federal judge is preparing to release Abrego while he awaits trial on the smuggling charges his attorneys called preposterous. Now, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it's clear that no one cares about humanity here. I mean, literally deporting criminals. They're just trying to move their personal agenda, come up with any reason to win these. Have you ever seen anything as crazy as this? Somebody that literally wants to stay in custody for fear that another part of the federal government is going to do something to them. It's a disgrace, and it's becoming a literal police state like you would see in Moscow. Now, it's time for your emotional support moment. This past weekend wrapped up Pride Month, and there were celebrations all across the country. Here is a recap from ABC News. Let's take a look.
From New York to San Francisco to Chicago. Wrapped in rainbows and showcasing pride, cities across the country celebrated LGBTQ plus communities with parades to close out Pride Month this weekend. Hundreds of thousands of people marched through Cincinnati streets on Saturday. Despite the heat, organizers say they think this year's turnout topped last year.
It shows that Pride is more important than it ever has been before.
Some attribute the large crowds across the country to the community's resilience despite national backlash.
We're not going to be deleted or quieted or silenced.
Tracy and Anthony Burns have attended Cincinnati Pride for 3 years, giving out free mom and dad hugs to make sure everyone feels loved.
Getting a hug from a dad, even if it's not their biological dad, it forms some kind of instant connection.
In St. Petersburg, hundreds of thousands celebrated at its 23rd annual Pride Festival.
This is probably the biggest I've seen it.
For many in attendance, they say Pride is about feeling accepted.
It's important to celebrate so that they see representations.
It's showing up and being visible and showing support to other people that need the support.
It's just beautiful. It's really nice to go from everything that we just talked about to that. So anyhow, I just, in the comments here, just a little reminder, if anyone has any questions, throw them in there. Love to answer them. And Susan, nice to see you in there as always on the Mary Trump Show. But if there's any comments, if there's no questions, feel free to throw some comments up there. Okay. I love this. Willed Chilled became a member. Thank you so much. I have to move my mouse, so I stopped covering it, but became a YouTube member. Thank you. Mary is going to be very excited to see that and appreciates that greatly. Another one, Indigo Lament. Hopefully I said that correct. Thank you for becoming a YouTube member of the Mary Trump Show. Deport Jeff Bezos. I don't think he's currently in the country, so hopefully he doesn't have any memes of JD Vance on his phone when he comes through customs, although he doesn't really come through customs the way that we do, does he? All right, my kitschy channel. Do you really think that Donald took the time to read all of that? I don't think he really takes the time to read much of anything. You know, one of the things that I find most interesting is if you go back a couple weeks, maybe it's been a couple months now. I feel like the time frame of reference just doesn't exist anymore when Donald's in office. But there was that moment where he was asked about a comment that Wall Street was using, taco, and you could tell it was the first time he had heard that. And what that made me think was that pretty much everyone around him in the White House doesn't tell him anything bad. And if a reporter finally steps up and stops acting like a tourist and does their job, a lot of times he's hearing things for the first time, unless he happens to see it on social media. So not only do I think he doesn't read things, but I think he really has a group of people around him that are shielding him from stuff that's, you know, in the New York Times and other places. That's real news that, you know, everyone's talking about it on Reddit and YouTube. Cam Meeg, 4381. Trump is all about legalizing corruption and cruelty. I totally agree. I mean, these tactics have been used, as we know, for forever. And it's like, if you haven't seen the documentary before, Active Measures, it's a really good one to watch. And featured in it is John McCain and Hillary Clinton and many others. But, you know, what we're seeing here is even a lot of Cold War tactics that are just being used almost like in an online version now. He's emulating Putin. When you go, you know, Moscow and other places, when police and law enforcement are covering their faces, right, and aren't not showing IDs or badges or anything else, this isn't law enforcement, right? If someone shows up with their face covered in a mask in a van, are you going to get in? You know, no warrant, nothing, and they're just grabbing you and putting you in. This is a police state they're building. So legalizing corruption and cruelty, I think for sure, he's trying to make that the new norm. And I think the best way to put it is Donald Trump is literally a guy heading into the November election who was facing time in the White House or in prison. And I mean, it doesn't get much crazier than that, right? That's the system that we're dealing with right now. So for him to normalize something where he literally could be either going behind bars or leader of the free world, something is seriously wrong. And all of this stuff, they're making it acceptable. And the Supreme Court continues to help him legalize all of that. All right. The forbidden pride in Hungary was bigger than ever. I mean, I think there's something special going on all throughout the world. We're seeing it here at home. We've seen it in other places, right? In other countries. You go back to 2014 in Ukraine, where you had Maidan. And at the time, you had a president, Yanukovych, who was put in office and instilled in office literally by Donald Trump's team. A lot of those folks that we don't even hear much about, you know, anymore. Paul Manafort, for example, right? And Paul Manafort ran a campaign in Ukraine back in 2014 that was called Make Ukraine Great Again. And it was a Putin stooge who now hides out in Russia, you know, after leaving in the early hours, you know, like 2, 3, 4 a.m. After the Ukrainian people stood up and overthrew it. So I'm really glad to hear the news out of Hungary and many other places. And it's nice to see how many folks throughout the world are standing with what's, at least I would say, you know, the silent majority here, despite our electoral college. Amber, of course, the Rubes and Deuces will cheer this bill on like they're going to be getting huge raises instead of funding tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. Yeah. Look, I mean, here's one of the most interesting, and by interesting, I mean deadly, probably, not a good thing, but we know how Republicans approach things. So what's really fascinating about this bill is they're trying to push this through. And then what will happen a month from now, 6 months from now, a lot of people aren't going to feel anything. Some people may not be affected until after the election in November of next year. That's their goal. All these changes are not going to happen right away. people are going to run out of prescriptions. Some people may not, run out until December of next year. So their hope by doing this is that they can pass and say, did your life change? And everyone's gonna be like, oh, no, and move on. But the reality is it's going to affect probably at least 20 million people losing their healthcare and what they need. But the ramifications are people are going to die. And that's it. They're going to die. Trump's kids are anchor babies. Yeah, that's right. I mean, probably shouldn't even say this on DC on air, but I was born in DC, and how long until they start cherry picking those of us that were born in Washington DC and saying we also weren't born in America, we were not born in a state. Look, Elon's got multiple citizenships, as Trump doesn't even know Donald doesn't even know half of his kids' names. Cherry picking and doing this the way that they're doing is right. And, when Donald just, went and authorized those strikes against Iran, my question to many was, when is Barron going to deploy? Or is he going to dodge it 5 times, like Donald? I'm glad at this, but when will the other deportees come home? Look, there are going to be people that never come home. We have a family friend. His name is Orlando. His birthday is today, June 30th. And a week and a half ago, his door was broken down in the middle of the night here in Virginia. And he was, by all accounts, kidnapped, taken to Louisiana, and is in Honduras today. He's somebody who our family has known for years and years. And his family is here. His kids are here. His tools are here. And today he celebrates his birthday alone in Honduras after what Donald Trump did. I don't know that he'll ever be back. And I think that that's the case for a lot of people. And it is a terrible, terrible situation. Now that Elon is telling Republicans he will do everything in his power to primary Republicans voting yes on this bill, will it not pass? I don't know. I mean, there could be 2 or 3 deflections here, or more. It's possible that it won't pass. The way that I like to look at this is, if this does pass, we can lose a battle, but not a war. It'll be more important than ever that people continue to move forward and step up. I know a lot of people feel like we may not even have an election in 2026. There's important elections happening this year as well in Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and others. No one's talking about the 3 Supreme Court seats that are up in Pennsylvania. But it is interesting that a number of Republicans feel, and I'll give an example, Tom Massey, that they can say certain things right now, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, as if almost they get protection from Elon, right? I think if Elon was not in the picture, Massey wouldn't be saying what he's saying. But you never see these folks go up against Donald Trump in any situation. They're all terrified. They're terrified of their own shadow. But the Elon element seems to have made things a little bit different, right? Because everybody was always worried that if they didn't stick with Donald Trump, they would no longer be in office because he would just cherry pick and handpick a primary opponent for them. The Elon piece, it makes it a little more interesting. But if you look at Tillis in the news over the past 48 hours, look, these people are really weak. This guy, we still don't know exactly what he's going to do, but he decided just to not run for re-election. Woohoo! I don't even live in Georgia, but love Warnock and donate to Ossoff. That's great. And look, I'll just say this too. There's a lot of candidates that people will tell you, we can't win those seats. They said that about someone that I worked with that was running against Lauren Boebert, and it came down to like 500 votes. But what's also important to remember is if you believe in a candidate, even if you think they're a long shot, every single vote that candidate brings out in a local race, and Michelle Obama talked about this a lot, especially about school boards and others. If a local school board candidate brings out 3 new voters, that's going to naturally help whoever is running statewide. There's also a governor's race in Georgia. There's a number of people running. That's going to be a tough one. We need to make sure that we have a good candidate. Primaries are really good. But these local races that are taking place in key states like Georgia and North Carolina and others are going to be key to helping the top of the ticket, because what we've seen historically nationally, especially from Democratic donors, which you typically find the big ones, you know, in New York and Texas and Florida and California, is that they give to not even the parties, but the top of the ticket. And we can't just invest in the top of the ticket. We lost almost 1,000 seats, maybe a little more, under President Obama's presidency, which was an incredible presidency. But at the same time, we had to rebuild a lot because we lost a lot of seats, despite the fact that he didn't really have a single thing go wrong, minus apparently wearing a tan suit that some people didn't like. We've won a lot of those seats back. And I think just since No Kings alone, the organization Run for Something has had another, I think, 2,200 people step up and announce that they're running for office or interested in running for office. So there's a lot of good things happening, but don't forget about those local races. In the middle of nowhere, 13 made a contribution to Mary Trump. She's going to appreciate that. Thank you. Do you think the back and forth between DJT and Elon is just staged? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think there may be moments, but Elon has just got like, neither of these guys are capable of sticking to any script. And Elon can't even, like, you know, stand still doing whatever he does. I think that there's probably a couple different things that they did, you know, to play games. But I think the reality is some of the stuff that's come out is real and has hurt certain people. Stephen Miller's wife going to work for Elon Musk was something that actually happened, and probably made things even more awkward given the, you know, the sort of breakup that was happening between Elon and Donald Trump. But I do think, with that said, they're clearly playing games. But I think on this one, the reason I would say for the most part no is the fact that Elon posted what he did about Jeffrey Epstein, and that Pam Bondi has still not released the Jeffrey Epstein files. And that is not something that Donald Trump would ever want Elon Musk tweeting in a million years, no matter, you know, what would be the net positive coming out of that. There's just nothing that would make Trump want that. All right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to our moderators. Thank you to those of you that are on here all the time. Thank you to those of you that are subscribers to Mary, you know, whether it's paid, free, you get the stickers. The folks that are commenting, you got her over 400,000 really quick. I think last time I checked, it had gone up another 20 plus. So grateful to be able to fill in and be here with all of you guys today. I'm going to check out more of the comments after the show, but I hope you guys have a great week. I just have one last thing to say. Make sure, if you haven't yet, call Congress. It's 202-224-3121. Again, 202-224-3121. These calls really do matter. And if you know somebody in some of these other states, if you know folks in, you know, North Carolina and Maine and Alaska and other places, just reach out to anybody that you know. And if you don't want to call and you don't want to text, post something on social media. All today, Vote No, hashtag Vote No has been trending on Twitter. So go check that out. Hashtag Vote No and 202-224-3121. Thank you guys. And it's been a pleasure filling in for Mary.